Cool,
Action.
good stuff. Okay, first I'm just have you introduce yourself, your name, and whatever title you want me to put as your lower third. So,
Hi, my name is Shauna Bowen. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology with an emphasis in holistic health and psychosomatic psychology. I'm also a licensed substance abuse counselor, and I'm currently a corporate wellness specialist.
okay, cool. Obviously, this film is about belief, so we're going to start from there. Tell me a little bit what you think belief is.
For me, I really feel that belief and how my beliefs have been created is through my own experiences in life and what has worked and not worked, or when I see a pattern, that I feel like that's where beliefs have come from for me. I would say in my earlier life, I used to listen to other people's beliefs and adopt those without the kind of personal trial and error. And I think when I did that, there was kind of like some real hard lessons. And then kind of reevaluating what is their belief and what is truly my belief.
How do you think we determine between something that we can say is a true belief and could be true or something that may not be correct?
You mean like truth with a capital T and then true?
Yeah, well, we could talk either one. Like if I have a belief that, for example, let's say I make a claim, for example, that there's a red dragon in my room right now. And Carl Sagan kind of brings up this kind of thing. There's a red dragon in my room. There's certain actual steps that we can do to produce whether or not this is a true statement, correct? Mm-hmm. What do you think is one of the best ways for us to determine what is true and what may not be correct?
I love the question because I truly think that each individual person has their own filter. And so what may be true for somebody else may not be true for me based on my own filter. And that filter, like with every life experience, that filter gets created and altered and changed. So, I mean, there's like layerings of what we can determine is true and what might be true for you and not true for me. And I think that's a cool question because, like, where's the line?
Right. You know, and the other reason why I bring that up is, you know, obviously not only do I challenge beliefs when it comes to sometimes even spirituality, but sometimes even just about ourselves. I know in a lot of your programs you talk about the belief in yourself and even the belief that could be wrong. For example, if you think that, and you can cuss, you're welcome to cuss here, if you think you're a piece of shit or you think you're not good enough in the world, you've got to be able to challenge that belief. And there's a way to challenge it. So how do we do that? How do we get certain beliefs to be more accurate that represent reality and maybe some things that may not be?
Mm-hmm. I love that because I saw that a lot when I was a licensed substance abuse counselor and I was working with teenagers and even adults that had that belief, I'm a piece of shit, I'm no good. And the way I worked with clients sometimes is that your truth or your opinion is not my truth, kind of a thing where what happened was a self-truth was developed from outside you. And you take these outside communications and opinions and it runs through your filter and then you go, yep, I'm a piece of shit. And then when you're treated like a piece of shit and then you start acting like a piece of shit, it kind of reaffirms itself and then it becomes a truth. And then you've got this truth in you. And I'm sitting with a brilliant, amazing young person who thinks they're no good. And it's really being that outside force that's going to be the challenge in a new way of offering perhaps a different opinion that they can consider or helping them understand, do you even have an internal filter or are you an empty shell that doesn't know you and you're just taking outside opinion? And so, I mean, that can go into like developmental psychology and all this stuff is how are we developing a sense of self? Is it the outside opinion? Is it the community? And then where do we in our development start having that personal filter where it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit for me. And I think that's so cool when I see a young person kind of challenge a parent and say, you know what, I'm not a piece of shit. I just got an A on that test and I really like math. And I was really kind to this person and they appreciated that and they complimented me. And it's like all of a sudden, wait, maybe I can challenge that. But I mean, it's so interesting, like where are those points where we go from the outside world defining us to now we're going to define ourselves. And you see that a lot with teenagers in rebellion. It's like they go the absolute opposite.
Right.
It's like, you've been telling me I'm a piece of shit, and now I'm going to like totally push back and do everything you don't want me to do, or whatever. So it's a very interesting, multi-layered, dimensional way to be like, how are our beliefs being created?
And I know a lot of those beliefs end up, we're trying to solve problems a lot of times as human beings, and sometimes we're trying to solve the problems of the beliefs of ourselves, and we turn to other things. And one of the things I know you're really good at understanding is, for example, is addiction. You know, and sometimes there's a belief in yourself that's causing you to lead you into that direction. Can you talk a little bit about that and how important that belief is and why it leads you to that?
It's really interesting. Like, people ask me all the time, well, what causes someone to go into addiction? And I think there's like a multi-attack that can create someone that goes down the road of addiction. And there becomes this belief that outside force is going to make everything all better. And you reinforce that over and over again, and then you have addiction and then chemical dependency. And so we have that belief going on. This is the only way I get through my day. And then with someone who perhaps is pursuing sobriety, we have to totally rethink that belief system, because the number one coping skill to get through the day is now the one that's harming you. And that's where denial comes from. It really is a belief system of, that's not what's causing the problems, everything else is. And it's interesting because I saw that belief change in a rock bottom when it became so bad that they're like, maybe I'm going to challenge that belief.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God, it has to get so bad before someone's like, all right, I'm willing to consider that maybe cocaine every 2 hours is not the only way to live, or whatever. Right. And then it's like trying to, and they've even like, I remember this one part in the movie What the Bleep, where they did that kind of like animation of neurons shifting.
Right.
And it's like, when you continue to do this, the neurons get like stronger and stronger. And then like in addiction, it's like you have to change everything. And it's kind of like pulling your entire belief system into, you don't need that to have a good life. And it's like changing everything. And I loved how they kind of showed the neurons eventually kind of shift into this like new way. Right. I love that.
Right. You know, and you bring up a really good point. And this is one of the things that I'm actually trying to challenge too is, do you think that there, like within, sometimes with the spirituality or even religion, that it may be the same process? And I'll walk you down this path logically, because I find a lot of same correlations between addiction and sometimes spiritual and religion. And what I mean by that is, we have a way of trying to solve problems and deal with them, and we turn to other things that may not be the correct processes in doing it. Then there's a stage of denial, you know, and so do you think there's a correlation between that and a lot of stuff you had just said? Or, I mean, what's your perspective on that?
I think it is. From my own experience, especially if I can bring up kind of the whole self-help craziness that kind of happened, is that it kind of threaded spirituality with like bettering your life. So it became like practical spirituality. Right. And like all of a sudden, everyone just jumped on the bandwagon. And so self-help became these like, it almost became spiritual practices. And then on top of that, it wasn't like, here's a way of having inner reflection. Here's a way to self-help you. It's, I have all the answers. In fact, I have the only answers. So come by my bigger and bigger programs, and I will give you the answers. And it's kind of like this carrot. And the people were just kind of doing this. And it's like, that is still a belief outside yourself.
That's a good point.
And so it's like it becomes another addiction. It's like something out there is going to make this okay, which is the epitome of every addiction. And so it was almost like there was this self-help spiritual crisis of that author, that book, that $10,000 seminar, that's going to make this okay. And here's what I think is, I'm not bagging on self-help. In fact, self-help raised me. Right. I mean, and I think you can relate that I was seeking self-help and spirituality very young in my life. No offense to my own family system.
Right.
But I just wasn't quite getting what I needed from the family system. And so at a very young age, I was reaching and testing and learning and watching people role model kindness or spirituality.
Tell me what's wrong.
Sorry.
Is that it?
I had to cough so bad.
Do you
or
need
I
to drink
was gonna
something?
die. I just did. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right. Okay. All right.
Okay, I can breathe.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in what you're talking about, especially when it comes to the self-help. So continue with that.
Okay. So what I was seeing in the self-help is really this, I'm going to take something outside myself and put it in here, and it's going to make everything all better. And what I really want to shift back to, because we're talking about belief, and for me, I really feel like it's that self-filter, that you take reality, you filter it through yourself, and then that's how you come up with a belief, is that I'm not bagging on self-help. Self-help raised me. I think self-help was very important to me. But I did see a shift and a dirtying within the industry in the past couple of years, and that kind of saddens me. But with that said, I think what I really want to encourage people to get back to, and it's certainly something that I'm getting back to, is if there's something not feeling right here, I may perhaps look out there for something that I will then put through my filter and see if it works or not. But it's not kind of this pedestal. I'm looking to this person and he or she is going to make everything okay, which is just one more addiction. And his belief system, her belief system, is my belief system, and I'm not going to challenge it. I think that is what started to happen, where people truly had no self-filter and were literally just blind faith taking someone else's belief system without kind of having that self-boundary. Like, there's me, there's the boundary, and there's the rest of the world. Guru is saying this is how it is. And not really checking in and being like, wait, this doesn't work for me. This doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to practice self-care. I'm going to use my filter and create a belief that that doesn't work for me. And I hope that we're getting back to that there's that like personal boundary.
Right.
When we are perhaps looking, like there are people that know things that I don't know.
Right.
And they're an expert in their field. I'm an expert in my field. And so I'm going to go listen or absorb a teaching, but it's still my boundary, my filter. And I will take and leave what feels right to me.
Okay. I know you definitely had experience in this, and we were just talking about this a little bit, with the the Sweat Lodge incident. And what I really want to know is, how does something like that to develop, and what is happening in that process? How does something that could be genuine and good, maybe for people, turn into something that could be challenging or tragic for people? What leads to that?
I think in the case that you're talking about is that there were a lot of things that kind of created the perfect storm. Mm-hmm. We had a self-help author that really was kind of egging on this, put me on a pedestal, I have your answers for you, I have the only answers for you, not I have a way to look at something, I am the only way to look at something. And when people put him on a pedestal, he kind of egged it on like this was good. So that right there sends off triggers for me as a licensed therapist, because that's kind of a transference between author and follower, where this is no longer, here's some suggestions in self-help. This is, I am the answer. So we had that going on. And I think because with some self-help authors, they are so charismatic and they are so engaging and they seem so genuine. And they look like they have it all together. I mean, they've got the money, the relationships, the success, they're happy. Like, it's like everything looks perfect, or at least they're portraying that. And so then there's kind of this comparison of, well, my life sucks and his looks awesome, so I'm going to let go of how I do things. And they're saying also, go ahead and do that because you don't have it right and I do. So I'm going to let go of how I do things and you're going to tell me how I should live. So the boundary and the filter go away. And then in the incident with James Ray and the Sweat Lodge, you had a spiritual ceremony layered on top of this, and you had people that had not eaten or had hydrated for, I believe, 2 days, and then were put through a very rigorous heat challenge. I'm not even going to call it a sweat lodge. Like, that would be so disrespectful. Right. They were put through a heat challenge called a sweat lodge, and literally were pushed to the point of, don't let the team down, don't let me down, be a team player, play full on. And you had people with no filter, no sugar levels, no hydration. They were suffering from heat stroke, which means anyone that's been taught first aid in Arizona knows that, I mean, we go through heat stroke. The reason people die of heat stroke is because they lose their common sense and don't know to get out of the heat. So we had that going on. Right. And a leader of this heat challenge that was pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. Okay. And so it was just like the perfect storm of just, it just was such a horrible tragedy. And I think the one piece that I really wanted to bring out, and I certainly brought it out in my book because I related, is that at that time, and thank God I was not in the sweat lodge, I just went to assist, that I was not in there, is that I wanted him to respect me and like me and to have me be accepted in his inner circle. And I respected his teachings and who he was, that I would not have known how to organize myself to say no. And I think that's crucial when you're dealing with a behavior coach or a success coach or some sort of self-help author, that you want to make sure that you go into that relationship as a full, whole person, that you're not broken, right. That you do not compare yourself to somebody else. So it's kind of like I look to people for information, and then I come back to me. I don't look up to people and forget who I am or what's safe for me.
That's a really great point. And one of the other reasons why I really want to make this film is, in my short film, A Virus Called Fear, one of the things I talked about is charismatic leaders, cults like the Jamestown Massacre, or even Hitler, when it came to millions of people believing in a philosophy that may or may not be accurate or correct. And then I don't believe every person looking for truth or trying to find even spirituality is going to fall off the cliff. But there's a lot of cult-like behavior that's happened throughout time that has led us in sometimes the wrong directions. You know, sometimes we've sacrificed people at the, burn witches at the stake because we believe these things. So how do we sort through? Because our minds are very good at deceiving ourselves. We're very good at getting caught up in social groups and thinking alike. And you said it's hard for us to kind of say, no, wait a minute, I got to step back and even think about it. So how do we address that? What's one of the ways that we can address that type of behavior or even that type of situation?
It's one of those questions where or one of those answers where it really starts with that internal filter and remembering that the decision and the belief starts here instead of out there. And I think also, just like from a community standpoint, that this is something that we really need to teach our children, is to develop in a way where they understand that there's still a core self that makes the final decision, instead of being fed a belief system that is perhaps not right for them. Okay. So it's really one of those things of start here and really understand. I think a lot of people are so, the whole looking for something. I mean, and through history, what we've seen is I think they are times of feeling empty, disconnected, afraid. And I think, in a lot of the spiritual teachings these days is that when we feel so empty, we're reaching out there instead of staying here.
Right, absolutely.
And really feeling, what is that emptiness, and can I fulfill within me? There was that great saying that happiness is not an outside experience, it's an inside job. Where I think the answer to that question is start here, role model here. And then let's teach our children to do the same, where we have that real nice, healthy, thick, personal boundary as we receive information from the outside world. I think a lot of us are just so, especially when the economy crashed. I mean, I lost my business and my house, and I believe in the law of attraction, and this is happening to me. And there was such this fear and anxiety and emptiness, and talk about my beliefs being challenged. And it was just in that moment, it was okay, I am still a human being with consciousness, And I need to stop with the belief that I am a business, I am a house,
Right.
that I am a part of this community or that community. And it was really coming back and realizing that I have peace. I can choose to have peace whether I'm living in a house or not.
Right.
And it was kind of like this trial and error of I had belief systems that were just crushed. And I had to reevaluate and even, go, okay, how does the law of attraction play in my life if this is a belief system I have?
Right. And that's a great question, too, because that's going to lead me to the next point. And in fact, I was just talking to Betsy about this, even with the law of attraction. When I first saw The Secret, I actually thought that my mind, my thoughts did create my reality. I thought if I just thought things that I would be bringing some things into my life. I questioned some things in the film, and only because I went down this road of really trying to figure out truth. It's not like I woke up one day, I was like, I just want to question everything because I hate everything. Or maybe that was it, I don't know. But no, but the reality is that since I was a young kid, I've always wondered about reality and what it is we're doing, how our minds think, how some people succeed in life, and why we get some things and some people don't. Some things in the movie made me really question things, like when they say, if you just think this long enough, you're going to get a car, you're going to get a bicycle. And to me, I kind of feel like, well, that kind of defies a lot of laws of physics that science hasn't really understood. And I know a lot of people in the spiritual community say, well, science doesn't have everything figured out. And they don't. And I understand that, okay? Right. But I also believe your thoughts do create your reality into the sense that anything you do in your life is a decision. If I want to make a table, I've got to think about that table. I've got to be able to, make a camera or make my clothes or do whatever. So if you look at the entire world's been redesigned by our thoughts. Mm-hmm. But only some thoughts and ideas have actually worked. And we have to test those ideas. You know what I'm saying? We have to test, and it's okay to fail in those testing. So where do we know in the law of attraction, where can we come up with the idea that which parts of law of attraction make sense and which parts may not be correct to you feel? And what is the law of attraction? Like, how do we define the law of attraction?
I love these questions, and I was definitely challenged. I remember there was a magazine author, I won't go into it, but she couldn't stand the law of attraction and couldn't stand that everything that was happening with all the hoopla was The Secret and James Ray and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I love the questions because we are challenging this postulation that law of attraction is real. In fact, it is absolute universal truth. Right. I had a lot of ups and downs with the law of attraction. I have absolutely created things that there is no other way to explain except that my laser beam thoughts of visualizing something really awesome, right, and then within 6 weeks having it happen. And in my first chapter of my book it's like, well, this is how it started, right? And it was like this. I used the law of attraction and it worked. And it was literally on a dare. Someone that was totally skeptical. It's like, this is crap. Mm-hmm. This is absolute crap. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like this. Yes. Right. And he said, and I said, there's this really cool thing that I want to do. And he said, well, why don't you use the law of attraction? And let's see if it happens. Mm-hmm. So on a dare, I said, okay. And so I followed what the movie said to do. Right. And 6 weeks later, I had created exactly what I was visualizing. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, it was so bizarre. I was like, the world is mine! Like, I just couldn't believe what had just happened. It was a miracle. And I'm like, I can have anything I want. I can do anything I want. Mm-hmm. It was just like magical. But what I will say with that is... Right. So then... and so it was kind of like I was continuing to create, and at the time it was being a homeowner, being a successful business owner, having financial success, being happy, and I was creating this. And so if you can imagine in 2008 and 2009, which was like way into the economy crashing, those were the two best years of my business. Right. And so I kind of felt like I was this one radio signal that was like, abundance, and everything around me was just crashing and burning. And then there's this little tiny light, no, abundance. And I was trying so hard to keep this like reality going, this vibration going. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what I believe happened is my environment was way louder with things suck, financial devastation.
Right.
I'm losing my house. I'm losing my business. And I mean, we know what happened in the Verde Valley. Like, it just crashed. And so what I believed happened is, even though I lost my business and my home, I believe that the community vibration was way stronger than my little vibration. And so it was almost like I got taken over. Like, almost like group mentality. And all of a sudden, my vibration became, and little by little, I was shown that the economy sucks, financial abundance is not possible, loss, loss, loss. And all of a sudden, and once you get going, and that's the thing that sucks about the law of attraction, is once you're in a vibration of loss, depression, grief, it is so hard to get back out of it.
Right.
And so I think that, for people to say, oh, you create your reality, so if something bad happens to you, you did that. That's really hard when a victim is hearing that. And coming from a perspective of having sexual abuse and rape in my history, and working with women, and saying the law of attraction is something to consider, but you're a rape victim, or you were abused as a child.
As if you brought it into your life because you thought those things, yeah.
So how, through my own filter, what I think is going on with the law of attraction, here are a couple things. One is, we are babies at this. We are in preschool when it comes to the law of attraction and how to use it. So I think we're kind of fiddling around with a little tiny here and there of making something happen. But for the most part, our vibration tends to be fairly low. And our community vibration or family vibration might be low. So it's really hard to spike it and really hold that to perhaps access quantum physics, to access the law of attraction. So I think a lot of people feel like a failure and feel like, well, I brought this on myself. And I just want to, that's kind of like this disclaimer is, we are brand new at this. We have no control over what we're really creating vibrationally. So as the disclaimer, it's kind of like, look, if your environment is vibrating louder than you, are you really creating your reality, or are you getting whatever is loudest in your environment? Also, if you know nothing about the law of attraction or how to use your thoughts to help create your reality, you're kind of getting whatever you get. You didn't consciously create something happening to you if you've never even accessed.
How does it work? Just in case, I mean, I'm sure people know who the law of, but just in case, maybe 100 years from now, people are watching, or somebody doesn't know, how does the law of attraction work?
Based on quantum physics and what I've known, and again, I'm just a babe at this, but what I've known, or what I've been taught, and what I've used through my own filter, is that we're really looking at that our thoughts have a vibration, an energetic vibration to them, kind of like a radio wave or a microwave. And so we don't say, oh, well, radio doesn't work because I can't see the waves in the air. We have radio waves going through us right now. Same thing with a microwave. We put something in the microwave, we press 2 minutes, and 2 minutes later we have a hot meal. But we don't go, oh, that didn't work because I didn't see the microwaves. So what's being suggested is that our thoughts are way more powerful than we thought. And it's creating a vibration kind of like a radio wave. Now, of course, they're all scattered all over the place. But what the teaching is if you can really harness a thought and really stay on that, and really raise your vibration. And they've even shown that depression, grief has a lower vibration because they now have equipment that you can actually see vibrations. Whereas before, we didn't have equipment that could see this. So now they're showing different vibrations. And what's being suggested is that the lower the emotional state, the lower the vibration. And it's like you're going to attract something similar if you're in grief or anger. Actually, it's kind of the griefs and the hopelessness, and then it's the angers and animation, and then it's the, well, maybe hopefulness, and then it's kind of that joy, gratitude, elation. And they're showing, so if you're vibrating at a level of joy, gratitude, elation, you're literally just attracting other situations that perhaps will give you that same feeling. That's really the law of attraction. It's the vibration of feeling. And I know this, when I'm frustrated, I will have other thoughts drop into my head that match the same kind of frustration. And it's like, oh yeah, and she did this, and oh yeah, last year, and it's like, oh. So again, it's kind of that law of attraction just in my thoughts. But man, when we're talking about like manifesting a car,
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, that is so. To me, I really think that you have to be a master, and you cannot. I think people that are already at the top, because if you think about it, the people really preaching the law of attraction are like these millionaire, successful, happy people. I think it's really easy to continue to attract when you're this millionaire, happy, I'm on top of the world guy.
Sure.
But when you're teaching someone who's like broke or just lost her business and her house, it's so hard to not take in the reality of the situation and to try and shoot up to a higher vibration. And that's why I feel like a lot of people who had hope in the law of attraction and have failed, I think that we have completely underestimated what is really required and involved to really turn your life around and to really create a vibration to attract something different than what the norm is. I think we see the norm, we attract the norm. So it's just one of those things that if I'm in a situation that's ho-hum, I'm vibrating ho-hum.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening is that, and then, for 15 minutes, I'm going to be visualizing how my life is supposed to be. Well, 15 minutes as opposed to the rest of your day.
Right.
So I just feel like there's a lot of kind of like, if you failed. And I think it's more, no, we're just beginning students. We're not failing. I wanted to share one scientific study that I really talk about kind of confirming a belief in the law of attraction.
Okay.
Because I certainly had some things that like counteracted it, and I had to really rethink what I was doing and what I was attracting and what was going on. But there was this one study that I heard about where they had this machine that had all these different kind of rollers on the bottom. And so it could kind of roll in any direction. Okay. And then there was a little computer on the top of this machine that generated completely random numbers and directions.
Right.
And so what they would do is they would put this machine in the dead center of a room with this random direction and number generator. Like, so if it said 2, maybe it was 2 millimeters. And this direction, and then maybe it was 7 that direction. And they would put this little machine in a room in the dark. They would shut the door and everyone would leave it alone. There was no consciousness or agenda. They would all just leave and it was forgotten. And they would come back like 2 days later, and what they found over and over and over in trials is that the machine would kind of move but pretty much stay in the center of the room. Over and over and over again they saw this. So then they took a group of baby chicks and they put them in a corner of the room, and they put a little light on top of this generating machine.
Right.
Apparently, little chicks are scared to death of the dark.
Okay.
So they've got this little light on the top. They'd put it in the center.
Right.
With the light on, in a dark room. They'd shut the door. No consciousness of human beings or anything. They just would leave it alone for 2 days. What they saw time and time again is that little machine was going towards the chicks. Time and time again. And so for me, I was like, okay, the chicks wanted the light closer to them.
Right.
And I believe they were influencing somehow this random generator to somehow go towards them because that's what they wanted. And it's so cool because human beings had nothing to do with it.
Right.
There was no human consciousness in the room, which is like, okay, there was a consciousness, but it wasn't skewed by a human being, which to me makes it a little more pure, a little more like easier to digest.
Right.
But I don't know what you think of that study, but I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
Because that was one of the questions I was even wondering just through my research is like, is the law of attraction just for humans or does it apply to other animals? And one of the things because one of the things I've wondered in trying to discover the law of attraction for myself, because especially when it comes to the frequencies and love, fear, I think that's where the frequencies are. The one thing I wondered, what keep hitting me in my tracks, because a lot of people ask, like, well, Ben, why'd you change your mind? Like, what? Because I was on this other path thinking I knew it. What it changed my mind is that I think there's a good hypothesis in frequencies, and maybe there's music that makes you feel more love, happiness, joy. There's things, obviously, that make you feel crappy, and you can run them through MRIs. But one of the things I always notice that in our reality is that we can detect a lot of the frequencies. What is it that we're not detecting in our thoughts? How do we detect those frequencies and how they actually work in the quantum world? How do we know what's going on there?
I think that really needs to be addressed with the people that are teaching the law of attraction. Is okay, so if this is a law and this is now happening, and we do have the equipment to now like capture it.
Right.
What do we do with this? And if we are not able to utilize the law of attraction like we want, what is next so that society can really get around this to use it for the greater good?
Right.
I mean, there was that great study in What the Bleep where they had the group of people meditate peace and like and they
And the crime rate?
right.
Yeah.
And it was just like, how can you like not look at that and wonder what would happen if we could have a group consciousness that was really visualizing peace? And
So what about the skeptics in that case? So
Right.
like, for example, like, and I want to play the devil's advocate here
Sure.
because I talk to a lot of also people that are skeptics and they have rational reasons for it. For example, like in much of a difference, or obviously there's a lot of scientists out there, and I don't think they're being narrow-minded. I think there's a group of people who think that spirituality is being narrow-minded, science is being narrow-minded, but science really hasn't been able to formulate why this is actually happening, and I think people get upset because science hasn't, but why haven't they? Is it just because they're being ignorant? Because I don't think they are. Most people I talk to have a genuine interest in reality, and if we present them evidence, based upon it, they're willing to change their mind. Like me, I'm a skeptic. I question things, and I told this to Betsy the other day. I said, I'm willing to change my mind, but what evidence is there so I can? Because I tend to find a lot of the studies, like we were talking about what the bleep do know with like the water, remember?
Yeah.
How your thoughts change the water, but that has never been replicated. And so I'm genuinely asking, well, why hasn't it been? You know, what is it are we right about our assumptions and what we think, or is there some things that may be right, we shouldn't be afraid to be wrong. So does that make sense? I know I'm going on to
right.
But so where do we make that determination? How do we figure that out? Why hasn't science understood quantum physics and law of attraction in that realm?
I hope that they're pursuing it. I hope who's ever out there that is trying to create the scientific proof for this new thing that's like been presented. I mean, it was on Oprah. Like it became kind of mainstream.
Right.
And I want science to back it up.
Right.
And I really like What the Bleep and Down the Rabbit Hole and some of the other stuff that came out of just the wonderful authors and scientists that were kind of like going after that. I think that is the questions that need to be answered for the skeptic.
Right.
And the cool thing is, thank God you're a skeptic, because you're using your own filter to determine what someone else's opinion or suggestion is.
Right.
And I think when there's the scientific proof, it perhaps can help a belief along the way. But for me, the law of attraction was something that happened to me, and I saw it work, and it kind of changed my life. But then I saw it not work, and then it questioned my beliefs. And so now I'm kind of like, wait, I can't negate that. And perhaps I was utilizing the law of attraction in like a very in a way that was correct or was enough to create something. And in the other ways, I just couldn't keep a vibration together, or I became so distracted by what was going on around me. So it's like, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, because then of course my teacher at the time for the law of attraction was James Ray.
Right.
And so then I had to that was just like, oh my God.
Right.
And it was kind of like, I got to the point, and I remember telling this magazine person, it was like, look, it's kind of like the reverse, where we don't want to shoot the message, but perhaps the messenger needs to be questioned right now.
You're absolutely right.
And so I had to really pull those threads apart, that this is James Ray and him as a personality, and this is a teaching called the law of attraction.
Right.
And so that really screwed with me for a while. And then once I was able to be like, okay, I'm going to try this again, because for a couple years I was like, screw everything, because I like bit it bad. Like it got bad. And we were like in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I'm like scraping for a job. And I thought, what the hell happened? 3 years ago, I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
It just was like, and I mean, talking about like questioning your beliefs, but I was like, I can't negate that first thing. Something magical happened. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm basically coming back to the law of attraction after like 2 years of literally giving it the finger.
Right.
But again, I was really feeling sorry for myself. I was in a lot of grief. I had a lot of loss, a lot of betrayal. And and that's the thing about the law of attraction that I think is really hard when someone has been in loss and grief and betrayal, is you have to own your shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, it's true. I have been a resentful, sad, grieving, dark, non-believer who's just like, screw the world. And I thought, oh, and look what's continuing to happen.
That's a good point, and I think that when people ask me, like, is that why you change? Like, is it because I'm very open about psychology and mental illness, especially in this country. And one of the things I wondered is, am I just so negative that I no longer want to believe in it? A lot of people think that, and it could be true to some extent. Part of it is also, is there a way to understand what the problem is, because we're problem-solving creatures. That's what we want to do. We have pain. We're going to run to something to solve it. Is there a better way to solve it than another? And that's where I'm at in my questioning because I feel I'm always angry, bitter, and pissed off too. And I think, well, is that why I'm attracting so much crap in my life? But then I'm also like, but is there a logical way for me to solve the problem? And is the law of attraction, is religion, or any system, and I question all of this. Because it is difficult to know which system it is, and it's not just where I'm at in that pit, And if I am in that pit, does science have a good understanding of how to get at that psychologically, versus if I was just a Buddhist or if I was, religious? How do I know which system works?
I think that's great. And one thing I want to thread through this is because, and I really would like to ask, like, Jack Canfield or Kevin Trudeau or any of the law of attraction greats, or Deepak Chopra, it's like, okay, there's one thing I want to bring up: mental illness, especially depression. You and I know depression
absolutely
very well. And what I would love to sit down and ask Kevin Trudeau or Deepak Chopra is, I know who I was and the thoughts that were the chronic thoughts when I was sick with depression.
Mm-hmm.
I also know what my thoughts were like when I treated my depression.
I want you to get back into what you're saying, but I really want you to answer this. The main thing I'm having a problem when it comes to beliefs is there's so many different beliefs, and there's people that kill each other over beliefs, and I think we want love, we want peace, we want to feel better in our lives, but not just us killing each other in the world for our beliefs, but just our relationships with each other and our families and our kids and our friends. There's a lot of beliefs that we're going to have to either give up, right, or change about something. So how do we deal with that? Especially when there's so many beliefs.
I go back into like a family systems counselor approach, which is kind of like a tolerance for what we're, different strokes for different folks.
Right.
I think that there is a line between violence and ridiculous insanity and kindness, an inclusion as opposed to an exclusion.
Right.
There's some sort of a line. I don't know what that is. That's a great, thing to go look at. But I think that what works for one may not work for other. And as long as those two people feel at peace and centered and understand who they are and come into relationship with kind of like, I know who I am, which means I'm not going to act out on you. And you know who you are, and you're not going to act out on me. So now we can safely enjoy each other's company.
What about if the belief systems require them to do this? There's parts of Islam that require you to, if you don't believe in this, you kill this person, or you treat people in terrible ways. Like there's a lot of things even in the Bible that just, for me, if you want to know love and empathy and compassion, which I think is what we're all really, that's where I do find the common ground with everyone, that people want love. It may not be I love you so much, but just that general, love, empathy, and compassion. But yet when I look at the world and I see people's beliefs and how they act, it's hard for me to believe in them. Like, the number one reason why I don't believe is I see people and the way that they act. So, I mean, where do we draw the line to say, okay, I'm being tolerant, but then there's like, wait a minute.
That's insane.
Absolutely not,
I think one way to look at it is you must believe what I believe for me to be okay. I think that's one boundary to look at, because if that's the agenda, it's more like I believe what I believe and I have no agenda. Right. As to what you believe, as long as I'm centered in kindness, love, whatever, self-respect, and I'm going to respect my relations. Right. But like when the belief is you need to believe what I believe, or you're not okay, or I'm going to create harm. I think that's a clear line. It's that agenda, and that's where I really question those kinds of beliefs. It's like, if you don't believe what they believe, you're like, you die?
Mm-hmm. Or
That's
you go to
crazy.
hell, or you do, yeah. And that's what I guess I don't get either, is like if I feel, even, let's even take in the concept of God, and I was talking about this, that I feel, and I'm not the perfect example by any means, but if you really know love, and you know yourself genuinely, you don't feel the need to hurt someone. You don't feel the need to take from someone. So this is another reason why I challenge the beliefs, because even if it is about love and understanding, compassion, and know thyself, I feel when you know yourself, you don't need anything from anyone else. You have everything that you need. So creating a hell to me doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like I don't need someone to believe in me if I was a God, if I'm all love, if I'm all knowing. And that's another reason why I challenge what it is we're believing. And I definitely want to go back into what you were just talking about, what you would like to ask for Deepak Chopra, and like what are the things you'd like to know. Remember we were talking about before the camera, so you want to get back?
Mental illness.
Yeah, because we were talking about mental illness, because to me, like I said, it's one thing for me to talk to spiritual people, talk to religious people, and be like, well, you need to follow God. But then you go to a mental hospital, you go to a drug rehabilitation center, and you see people genuinely suffering. You see gang members, on the street killing each other and doing something. And I feel like, what is the message that we can really let them know that they can take the tools, like you say in your program, take the tools and to be able to use? And how do we address mental illness in spirituality, or what you were going to say to Deepak? Or
Right, that would be, because I mean, and we were talking about this, that you and I both know intimately what real depression is. That horrible darkness that, I mean, for me, I used to explain it that I felt like I had black tar running through my veins. And I felt like I was in the sandstorm, and I would see people laughing and having fun and enjoying things. And I'm in this like terrified, I felt like I was being squeezed in terror all the time. And it's like I could not access joy, even though it was right in front of me, which made me feel insane.
Right.
And so I think we have a ground level of
100%, 110%. If there's more than 10 to 100, go ahead.
So that used to be my reality.
Right.
And I'm like, there is something seriously wrong with me. It'd be like a summer day and everyone's laughing and playing in the lake, and I'm sitting there like contemplating suicide and contemplating how horrible the world is and how mean everybody is and that there's no hope. And it was just this crushing darkness. And so then you have people like Deepak Chopra, Kevin Trudeau, Jack Canfield saying, and even Abraham Hicks, that they're all saying that your thoughts create your reality. And one of the things I really wanted to just crack open and look at is, I know that when I was in depression, when I was sick with mental illness, I could not access a high vibrational thought because my neurochemistry was totally sick.
Right.
I also know what it's like to be in recovery of depression, to have treated depression, where now I have this bright affect and I can access joy, I can access elation, I can literally, in a visualization, bring myself to tears of gratitude.
Sure.
And I can get myself there, but there is no way when I was sick with mental illness to even understand how to get there. So I wanted to kind of thread through, where does mental illness and neurochemical, like we know that we had a serotonin deficiency.
Yes.
I mean, we know,
right.
And that's what all the SSRIs are about, is like to bring up the serotonin so we can have that brighter affect. So, and that's chemistry.
Right.
And then we have the law of attraction. And I know that when my chemistry is a certain way, I have a much easier time accessing a high vibrational thought. And I thought that would be a great discussion to have with one of the bigs that is talking about the law of attraction.
I'm going to have to do that, because I'm getting interviews with some of these people, hopefully. So, like I said, if there's things you want me to ask them, I'll ask them too. So just let me know.
Sure.
Like, you bring up a good point too, because we're talking about serotonin and depression. One of the things I've been finding out in this journey I've been doing is about dopamine, and how a lot of times when we influx dopamine into our brains, a good healthy amount of dopamine will create happiness and whatever else. Obviously, when it comes to drugs, it can create an unfortunate reward of what we perceive to be happiness. But I also started to find out that a lot of dopamine creates actually kind of over creativity, over madness, and over seeing too many patterns. one of the things I wondered, especially, I really love studying psychedelics, and I know we're talking about drugs here, but not into drug use, just what it's doing to the brain and dopamines. I love studying geniuses and how they think and what's going on their dopamine levels. I often wonder sometimes, do we see patterns in reality that don't exist based off of dopamine, and that's why we think all, and I'll put it on a two-way street. Am I using dopamine when I walk into a church and I'm singing a hymn and I'm in a group setting and I want to, and that dopamine, just like drugs, is hard for me to break away from and to think critically. Is it the same with law of attraction? Is it? Is that a valid question even to ask?
I think so, because I come from it. It's so weird because I kind of thread a lot of beliefs together for myself.
Right.
Ever since I was introduced to orthomolecular science and neurotransmitters and my own depressions and addictions with sugar and food and all this kind of stuff, it was like the missing piece. And it's like you can think and think and think, but if you're depressed, to me, you're going nowhere. So I really added the neurotransmitter piece, which is all chemical. It is chemicals hitting our brain in certain ways and creating certain emotions.
Right.
And I would love to talk about even the quantum physics people and what the bleep people is like, where does neurotransmitters and vibrational states meet? I am so fascinated by this because all I can do is go by my own experience, which is I have corrected my neurochemistry and I now have serotonin that works correctly. And I'm like, it's so much easier to access higher vibrational thoughts. So I think it needs to be threaded through. I think it's a great conversation to start asking, and I have yet to hear anyone ask that question or have it answered.
Okay.
Regarding that, so
Right.
I think it's a great new nut to crack when we're talking about the law of attraction.
Is there any testing you think that we could be doing more of that would help either move forward and understand things like what we think about quantum physics of the law of attraction? Like, what can we do as a hypothesis to kind of push it in the direction to understanding it better, do you think? Because I can never think of how can we, it's one thing to say that we know, but how do we demonstrate it? What kind of tests can we create to move forward with that?
I think the chick test was at least a good starter where I was like, I could not deny that test. And they did it over and over and over and over and over again. And it was the same results. And I thought, okay, I cannot deny something happened there.
Right.
I also love the test where they changed the crime rate. Now, if there were questions on how much or whatever, keep doing it. And I thought in what the bleep they had said, they had done it over and over and over again and gotten the same result. So I really think it's doing those kinds of tests and really offering a significant difference between just ho-hum, we get what we get,
Right.
or consciously willing or visualizing a different result and really offering that statistical data. And I think it's going that way.
Right.
I guess it just depends on who you talk to.
And if there was anything that maybe we found that was challenging, that maybe the information may not be accurate or different, how much would that change your opinion, or would it? And what I mean by that is, I talked to a lot of people, and I was just talking recently to Betsy about firewalking, and I saw the scientifically really why it's happening more than whatever. I think a lot of times we're afraid of being wrong. There's two things I think humans are afraid of more than anything: what they don't know, that we're afraid to say we don't know, and that we could be wrong. And I'm that person. I hate being wrong. Don't get me wrong. But but I also feel like sometimes when we're wrong, it gets us a little bit closer to right. So if there's processes that you might be wrong, solving problems, or you know what I'm saying, like what is the question I'm trying to ask?
I think you're personally asking me if I was proven, if I was offered some sort of scientific
evidence,
data.
yeah. How much would that change your life? Would you be like, okay, I can accept that and I'm okay with it, and would you continue to move in another direction, or would you say, you know what, it's not enough? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is every time I talk to people and their beliefs, there's sometimes I really am presenting something that we found is factual, and they still don't change their mind, and I know that I can't change everybody's mind, but sometimes I wonder, well, why? Do you want to know the truth? Because maybe there's a truth beyond even what we think. Maybe there's something beyond you and me right now that we're not getting. So how would that affect you?
For me, I'm always willing to listen to other people's experience, listen to other people's suggestions and beliefs, and see scientific data. Right. I'm very open in that way. And in my own personal filter, there are certain things that have happened in my life that are mine and mine alone. They didn't happen to anybody else. I could go into some very interesting, miraculous things that have happened in my life that are absolutely unexplainable,
Right.
except in how I have come to believe them.
Right.
And so I will take the outside influence, but it's still being filtered through what's happened to me and what I think is real. I'm open-minded. And there are certain truths that have just been absolutely proven to me that maybe others will never buy into. It's just like, that is ridiculous. Whereas for me, it's like, no, this happened. I can't explain it except in the way that I believe. And you can give me scientific data, but something happened. And I'm not letting go of that, even though you may say, well, here's the truth.
Absolutely. And one of the arguments I get a lot of times with people is like, it was my reality, it was subject. And so I always try to figure out subjective truth and objective truth, because there's things that obviously have happened to me that I'm like, I can't explain this to anybody either. And I've been under certain states of mind where it was so unbelievably real. But then I also question it now in my life. I'm like, well, just because it was real for me, is it real too? Does it really match? Because, for example, just dreaming. Let's take something simple as dreaming. None of you guys have really been in my dream to experience it, but you and me can right now determine something reality. So there's some objective truth that we can kind of agree with, but then there's some things that it's subjective, even though it felt real to me, but you didn't do it. So how do we still determine truth through that? How do we know that why do we believe that our personal experiences are real?
I think it has to do with the idea of the witness, where there can be a group witness that we're all witnessing these chairs. They're made out of wood and they're hard and they're holding us.
Right.
And then something that was truly just witnessed by you in your own consciousness. And so if there's a group witnessing, I think there's a group cohesion of, if we all agree we're seeing the same thing, then there's a kind of truth there.
Right.
But if you were the only one witnessing and feeling, that could absolutely be true for you. Like sometimes I see something, no one else is seeing it.
Right.
I can't explain it, but it's happening, and it happened once while we were talking. It's happened my whole life, and I'll even point to it, and everyone else is like, I don't see it. And it's like, what do I do with that? What do I do with that?
Right.
Because it's consistently, from time to time, I see something.
Right. Do you ever question it? Do you ever wonder why that you do see it? Like, that's what it is for me. Because I used to dream things and see things, and I've been under like certain types of substances where I'm seeing things, and I know I can't convince myself that it's not real, and I know that it is. But like I said, even now when it happens, I ask myself, even though it feels real, I'm like, is this really real? Do you ever question, like, is this really happening, or is my mind just playing tricks on me? Like, because our brains do deceive us.
Absolutely. And I think, that goes back into neurotransmitters that, like you said, when your dopamine's skyrocketing, that's when you're seeing mania and insanity.
Right.
And so we know that if we take the dopamine down, all of a sudden they're seeing the same thing that everyone else is seeing. And it's like, man, the brain is so amazing that alter the neurochemistry slightly, and all of a sudden someone that's seeing God Almighty is all of a sudden like, oh, hi. And it's like, oh, because they're feeling like it was this awesome spiritual experience. And then we're like, when we took the dopamine down, he stopped having it.
That's
so
exactly it.
Was it a spiritual experience, or was it a neurochemical misfire?
That is the $1 million question for me, because I felt under these experiences they were spiritual to me. I still do, but when I'm in a normal state, logically thinking, my prefrontal cortex, trying to logically separate, I'm like, wait a minute, is it really that real? Because there's times I'll sit and evaluate, like, under those influences, I'll write and I'll be like, this feels, I'm always questioning my feeling in another experience. I'm like, at this very moment, it feels like a real spiritual experience to me. But I've also come to the point now where I've gained so much knowledge that I'm like, well, just because you think that it is it? Because I can't convince myself, but once I come back down off of that dopamine and I'm logically thinking about it, I'm like, why did you think that it was real? There's almost like there's these two halves of my brains, and that's what I'm always trying to wonder is that why? But I can't demonstrate this other half to you or anybody else too. But I can demonstrate this, so that's why I trust this a little more. That's why I question it, but I don't know.
I think neurochemistry does play a part in our perception of reality.
Right.
And I think looking at mental illness, that we have a misfiring of neurochemistry, that perhaps is creating something that might be a little more open than not. And so I still think that you had a spiritual experience, because if it created some sort of creativity or an inspired thought to do something, it's and here's where it gets really weird. What if the inspired thought was to harm people or yourself, which we see?
Is that a spiritual experience?
I don't.
Like,
I hope not.
Is Hitler a spiritual experience? I mean, that's a
Right.
genuine question,
I
right?
I know. So it
that's
gets
what's
really
scary.
bizarre, because like when people are like, "Oh, I witnessed Jesus Christ, we had a conversation." It's like, dude, you are so manic right now.
Yeah.
Like, you are presenting as manic, and we know your dopamine is through the roof right now.
Right.
And it's so, to me, I'm like, don't take that spiritual experience away from them. But I know their dopamine is completely misfiring, and they think they're having this spiritual experience. And so I've had to really back up and go, okay, can it be both and more? Can a misfiring of neurochemistry create maybe a piercing of the veil?
That's a great question, actually. I do wonder that. I mean, but then how do we deal with schizophrenia in the same sense? Like,
Right.
if a schizophrenic person comes into a psychologist, and do we tell them, hey, you know, what you're seeing and perceiving may not be, because what if he is experiencing something we're just not understanding? I mean, that's where I'm always confused. The difference between schizophrenia and spirituality is I don't know, where do you see that?
I have run up across that in public mental health and in rehab centers, and I really kind of taken that. It's like, whoa, everybody, let's not like jump to conclusions yet, you know, because I have had spiritual experiences that if I told certain people, they might label me as schizophrenic, and that is not the case.
Right.
So I really think it comes down to really kind of taking the whole situation and all of the symptomology and what's going on with the person, and really kind of taking in a lot of information and gingerly moving towards an explanation.
Right.
There are people that obviously their neurochemistry is misfiring, and it's creating delusions or illusions. We know this, but on the other hand, we have this a person's where their neurochemistry is firing correctly, or a social norm. They behave in a social norm, and then there's a piercing of the veil, and something happens, which is not insanity; it's a spiritual experience. So it's like, oh, where is the line?
How do you know it's real? That's the ultimate question, because I feel that is me. I'm very skeptical, but there's still a part of me that really it's. I always tell people this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is let go of my spirituality. And I know a lot of people are like, then why did you do it? It's like, but I don't think you understand. Walking down this path, I have never been this logical in my life, I feel. But there's still this part where my mind goes to this other place, and it feels this like it's real. But it's almost like I have to kind of convince myself, no, it's not. And our brains are very good at wanting to believe and wanting, so that's why I'm like, no, but it still feels, so I'm still empathetic, and I still understand the spiritual experience, and I don't want people to devalue that in me and what I'm trying to say. And that's why I ask myself, do I understand something beyond this reality and this veil, and then I'm coming closer to it? Or maybe I am schizophrenic. Maybe there's a mental illness in me. I know that I have mental illness. I know I'm studying psychology, and maybe there's something misfiring in my own brain, and it's creating it. And either way, I feel like either way, I'm going to understand something, hopefully, about myself and about reality and about my mind. You know, whether I can accept it or the world can accept it, I don't know. It remains to be seen. So I don't know. But is there any last thoughts you want to say that maybe I'm not asking, or something that you'd like to talk about when it comes to belief, or something even that maybe science isn't understanding, or something you want to address to people about the topic of belief?
I think for me, I've really been open to just hearing other people's experiences, and when I can relate, there's kind of like a little more layer of confirmation.
Right.
And it's like, well, if they had the same experience, because I know there's other people that see what I see, and it's like, okay, now I don't feel like such a weirdo.
Right.
There's something about having others have a similar experience that at least helps my belief system. Right. But then also it's that personal journey, and I think it all starts with come back to here. And I sometimes in visualizations will say, you know, go from your awareness being in front of your eyes to behind your eyes, and sitting in that place when you are evaluating or listening to someone with a different belief system.
Right.
I think the other thing just regarding beliefs in general is if we hold on to a belief, no matter what is being presented to us, even if like the science is there saying this is not real, I think sometimes we may hold on to a belief out of fear or out of personal agenda. And that's where I really think that we should come back and personally do an evaluation of why are we believing what we're believing. Is it to keep us from feeling afraid? Or is it, something else? And are we willing, like I remember one of the teachers of the Law of Attraction said, you must be teachable or this is not going to happen for you. There was something about you have to keep open-minded about what we're going to present because it may go against a belief. And if you're open-minded to hearing another perspective, that would be better than being closed-minded.
Sure.